Hi, I'm Laura Sharp. Welcome back to Tea in 21. Last episode, we talked about my daughter Lucy being born. This episode, we're going to talk about her first 18 months with us. And I'm kindly joined today by my mum, Julie. Do you want to introduce yourself, Mum, and tell us a bit about yourself, please?
Hi. Well, I've been Laura's mum for 46 years. Oops.
Thanks, Mum.
And it's been an absolute pleasure.
You don't have to just say nice things about me.
She was so beautiful and she was welcomed and loved. And I started working when Laura was about 4. So I was very fortunate. I didn't have to plough straight out there. So we spent a lot of time together. And then started work. I've done all sorts with my career. I've owned a couple of dress shops. What else have I done? I can't remember now. It's so long ago.
I think going from the dress shops was working with Dad, wasn't it?
Yes, I worked with Laura's dad, Tony, for 8 years, I think it was, something like that. I've done property development, and then I've sold camera kits
and
very
canvas art as well. You had a business selling canvas art.
Oh yeah, when nobody else did it. Yeah, that was
early
very
days
exciting.
That, yeah.
I loved that. Going to Top Drawer and then I did quite a bit of TV work to promote that on things like The House Doctor and
Colin and Justin's How Not to Decorate.
Yes.
They were very funny.
Yes, they were. And they did, really, How Not to Decorate was really very appropriate for them. Ooh. No, they were lovely. So, and came over to Newcastle and lived up here, Carlisle and Newcastle for about 14 years. And then went back, as you maybe, I don't know, Laura's maybe talked about her dad being poorly.
I think I have touched on it, yeah.
And I was from Harrogate and lived there all my life until we went up to Carlisle and he was working at Border TV. My girlfriends, amazingly, were saying, if you don't sort this out, we can't support you while you're up there, but we can support you emotionally if you come home. Mm-hmm. So we packed up, and Tony and I packed up and came back to Harrogate.
About 9 or 10 years ago, that was, I think.
It was 2000. No, it was not as long ago. It was 2017, I think, when we came back.
8 years ago.
Yeah. So, and it was the right thing to do because it wasn't much later that Daddy got taken psychotic, and they took him into care. So
yeah,
it's been.
You had more family and friends around you, didn't you? And it was so you had more support.
And now I live in sunny Ripon, so I'm not so far away.
No, you're like 20 minutes closer to us in Newcastle, which is great.
Yes, and I get to see Lucy more.
So going back to Lucy being born, she was born on the Wednesday, and we had a sort of a, I don't think I really talked about it in the last episode because we literally talked all about the kind of process of Lucy being born and the C-section and stuff. So we didn't get to the point where Lucy had kind of come into the world and what happened next. So I'm just going to sort of briefly talk through that. And obviously you'll remember, Mum, because it was quite a stressful day or a stressful 24 hours. And it was a funny one because she was born so kind of happy and healthy and no one could quite believe it. And I think I talked in the last episode about the paediatrician leaving the room while they were still sewing me up from the section and me trying to grab her going out the door to say, you need to look after Lucy, not me. Why are you leaving? And then Lucy was put onto me skin to skin. And I never expected that. And it was, as per every episode, I'm about to cry. It was a very emotional moment when they put her skin to skin to me because I would just had built myself up so much, hadn't I, with all of the different discussions with the doctors that because of her heart condition, she'd be taken away immediately. So they didn't take her away. We went into the normal area you go into sort of post-birth where you just kind of get used to this child being with you. And then you get moved onto a ward. And that sort of, I don't know how long we were in that room. John might remember, but it was probably a couple of hours maybe in that room where we just literally we just stared at her. It could have been 6 hours. I have no idea. We just sat and stared at her and both kept crying. And he was able to kind of, get hold of her and give her a hug. And I've got a lovely picture of John doing that, which was beautiful. And then they moved us onto the ward. And what transpired is they moved us onto the ward that all the other mums went on. And that night, I was trying to feed Lucy, and I'd been promised by the feeding midwife prior to Lucy being born that she would come and help me with the feeding because I'd never fed a baby before, and I was really worried about it because, there's a lot of talk of children with Down syndrome having sort of the weak muscles around their, their jaw and everything, and will they be able to, or their tongue or whatever, will they be able to latch and all the rest of it. But I felt like she was. I wasn't sure, but I felt like she was. And I had harvested all that colostrum. Do you remember? I was obsessed. Mum, I got 2 mils today. I kept texting you, didn't I? It was a very bizarre thing to be doing before she was born. But I did all of that, and she had all of that colostrum. And then through the night, they ran out of that colostrum because obviously she was born quite early on the Wednesday morning, and then through the Wednesday night they ran out, and that's when they said you need to really be trying to feed her. But of course it was the middle of the night. I'd had a section. I was in a lot of pain. I didn't really know what I was doing. And the next thing, I just remember a midwife standing at the end of the bed saying, "Get her off you. She's not latching properly. All she's going to do is hurt you. You obviously can't feed her. Get her off you." So I did, and it was like, well, what do I do then? So I put her back in a cot, which was, I remember being extremely painful. Just turning and trying to lift her into the cot was excruciating. So I didn't want to keep doing that.
Well, it cuts through all your muscle, don't they? Cesarean.
Yeah. So I did that, and I just kind of left her there, and she went to sleep. I think I must have gone to sleep. And then John arrived in the morning, and John had her on him, cuddling her, and she was asleep still. And then the paediatrician came to do her rounds, and with Lucy having Down syndrome, I don't think she went to everybody, but she came to us to check Lucy over. And she said, "She seems very sleepy. Are you aware that she's more sleepy than she should be?" And we were like, "No." We just thought she was a baby and she was asleep.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Let me just do a quick pinprick test and just have a look at her bloods." So they literally just stuck a pin in her toe, did the bloods, and her blood sugar was dangerously low because she hadn't had anything to eat since probably, the evening before. She hadn't had anything through the night. So it was quite scary. And that situation was what I imagined it to be like when I had my section, that didn't really end up transpiring, with all of these doctors and nurses descending on you. And lots of kind of panicked, and with it being still, it was 2021, but people were still wearing masks. So you could only really see people's eyes, and you can tell when somebody's panicking in their eyes. And I saw the panic in their eyes, and I was like, oh my God, what is going on? And they immediately put a feeding tube in, and then they moved us round to another ward, which is like an intermediary ward between the normal standard ward and the PICU ward. And they put us on that ward, and it turns out that's the ward we should have gone on to in the first place. So I did speak to the consultant afterwards, and he's assured me it wouldn't happen again. If a child's born with Down syndrome, they would always go on to that ward, where the midwives are a little bit more proactive and have experience from PICU. That's where they tend to move from PICU onto that ward, and they're able to kind of support you a bit more. I was obviously just left to my own devices, and I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And they put a feeding tube in and got some formula into her. And within half an hour, she perked up and her blood sugars came back to normal. But we did have sort of 2 or 3 days of kind of, is she okay? Making sure she was getting enough, of the formula I was trying to express to give her my milk. And it was, and it was because of COVID. I remember you were desperate to come in and see her, but I was like, it's a bit tricky, because they're not really allowing visitors. John was allowed to come, but they were a bit funny about additional sort of grandparents and things coming. And I kept saying, I will be home quickly. I feel like I will. And we were, we were worried with it being a bank holiday, we were going to be kept in till the Tuesday. But we somehow, because the paediatrician was fantastic and I think felt bad about what had happened on the Wednesday night, she pushed for us to get home on the Saturday, and she pulled a few strings, and we got all the tests done that we needed to get done, like hearing. They had to do an echo on her heart to make sure there wasn't anything dramatically different to what they were expecting to see. They did all of that and sent us home, and we arrived through the door. And I think you and my brother and his wife were already there, weren't you, in the house waiting?
Oh, amazing. I mean, it's just, this beautiful little thing, Lucy. Oh, it was fabulous. And in fact, we've got a picture of George and Winnie and I all just going, oh.
I know, your faces are so adorable on that photo.
No, it's lovely.
Yeah, it is.
No, she was just so precious. And really a sense of, has this really happened? Because there'd been so much stress and build up to it, and then there she was, and really quite fit and healthy as a baby, wasn't she? But
once we got her blood sugar sorted, she was fine, really, wasn't she? And
a lot, because there was a lot of anticipation that would she be all right? How would she be?
Would she need oxygen and all that?
We didn't know. So, and waiting was agony.
Yeah.
But, no, it was fabulous.
So that moment when you met Lucy and your emotions and how precious she was, I think that sort of brings me back to those, like you say, there'd been a lot of stress over the pregnancy. And I've mentioned that on a couple of the episodes, kind of, you can't, as much as I'm a positive person, you can't detract from the fact that there is trauma there from the process of Lucy's diagnosis and things.
Absolutely.
So I'm interested, obviously people have heard it from my point of view. I'm interested to hear from your point of view from that moment of finding out I was pregnant to probably kind of getting through the diagnosis, sort of how you felt.
Yes, well, it was a very, very stressful time for me because Tony was also, he'd been sexually assaulted in his care home. And it was, do we get the police involved? What do we do? And then Laura...
And you didn't want to tell me.
I couldn't tell Laura because there was too much going on.
It would have been the thing that would have probably tipped me over the edge if I'd have known what happened to Dad.
And I didn't want to, because I hadn't told Laura, I didn't want to tell my son George because it just didn't seem fair to burden him with that. And knowing that Laura didn't know. And there was a lot going on. But at the end of the day, Laura was asking me for her advice. And I knew it wasn't up to me. Whatever happened, whatever I might have thought or anybody in the family might have thought, it was Laura and John's decision what they were going to do when they got this bizarre way of being diagnosed for Lucy, that it was ridiculous, really, what happened in terms of how that came about.
The lack of support.
Oh, it was terrible.
From the community midwife and the doctor who...
Yes. Yeah. So... but the build up to that, before, when Laura was first pregnant, it was, very, very stressful. And I was going on what Laura was telling me, but at the end of the day, it was Laura and John's decision. And ultimately, it was definitely, I think, Laura's decision ultimately. At the end of the day, Laura was going to have to carry Lucy. What complications were going to happen with that, if any? We didn't know. So it was lots of sleepless nights. And Laura, ringing quite regularly. I was already emotionally upset with the whole situation about Dad, and because life goes on.
When I look back, it kind of makes sense because you did seem kind of probably more emotional than I would have expected you to. But it makes sense why now.
Yeah. And I didn't know anything at all about Down syndrome, nothing at all.
Well, same as me. I didn't, did I?
Yeah. So anything I could glean, it was a very difficult time. And the way that I think that it was handled in the specialist saying, well, it wasn't a specialist, it was one
of the consultants from FMU.
Yeah, saying, yes, you've definitely got Down syndrome, because we've been through all that journey of trying to not have the amniocentesis,
CSV,
and
whatever it was.
or that not coming back positive in enough of whatever needed to be there. You had that twice, and then we had
the NIPT testing.
Yeah, I was so pleased.
Where I just had my bloods done, and it kept coming back.
And I was so pleased when they were fantastic in that clinic, and they said it was quite rare for it not to come back with a positive or negative. And that they quickly rushed you down, got you an appointment at the hospital, and yes, you had to have that needle.
The test,
which you were so brave, and you were
I
fine,
had it the same day.
Fine,
I didn't have to have more sleepless nights.
Exactly. I was worried about Laura's anxiety anyway, and they took us straight in, so that was a big relief for me. And but when it came back and it's like, well, baby definitely has Down syndrome, and termination clinics on Wednesday. It's like, oh my God, what a way to deal with it. And now, even now, when I think about it, my heart goes out to people who don't know at all until baby's born. But we had those emotions in the same way, because we've been building up to this, what was happening, and everything was very positive, can I say? And leaning towards baby Lucy doesn't have Down syndrome.
Yes, because the nuchal fold measurement was borderline. My bloods were a bit all over the place. The NIPT testing didn't work.
Twice it came back.
So, it was kind of,
Yeah, we didn't know.
It was, but like you said.
So it was a real shock. And a final thing. And poor Laura, having to make decisions there and then.
So quickly.
Oh, it's terrible.
I had the Easter weekend and that was it.
I came to stay.
Yes. You came up on the Saturday.
And we watched loads of stuff on YouTube, didn't we? And at the end of it, it was like, well, there's no question here. We're just going to have this baby. Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Sally
Phillips.
It was, Sally Phillips documentary had a massive impact.
Yeah.
And also the girl that talked from
the lady
TEDx.
that did the TEDx
talk.
She
was amazing.
Yeah. Who has Down syndrome herself,
And thanking the professor who'd got her, was it her second or third degree or something?
Yeah.
And we were like, oh, this has just got to happen,
We've
whatever's going on.
Yeah.
We're ready for it now.
Yeah.
That was a weekend.
Yeah.
Bring it on.
Yeah. We knew we needed to do our research.
Yeah.
I talked a lot to, I very quickly reached out to people from the community, got numbers of different people.
And I knew
those conversations.
For you, for Laura, she needed that decision so that then she could move forward on it, because she's so, so organised, so meticulous about things, very controlling, can I say?
Yes, you're allowed to say that, Mum. Not everybody's allowed to say it, but you're allowed to say that.
I knew she needed to know what the situation was and what she was going to do. And the longer we, procrastinated over this, the more worry it was.
The harder it was in my
and John was
head.
Straight there, this is happening, this is my baby.
Yeah.
So, it was great to make that decision for Laura.
He basically
whatever it was, you were going to deal with it.
Yeah. And John wasn't phased, basically, was he? He said, it's your body, it's your decision, but I'm here for you either way.
Yes.
But if you want to carry on, that doesn't worry me as much as it probably worries you. It doesn't worry me so much. And I think that's carried on right up to this present day, really, hasn't it? He's always like, it'll be fine.
It'll be fine. Yes. And I think I was very much in the same vein. Once we knew what was happening, it was all right,
let's get on with it.
Enough of this, let's just get on with it.
Yeah. So to bring us more up to date, then obviously we talked about your feelings around when Lucy was diagnosed and everything. Talking about once Lucy was born and bringing her home and yours and George and Winnie's reactions and everything. I had this new baby that, as far as I was concerned, was just a baby I needed to look after. I didn't know any different with regards to what I needed to do for Lucy. I was taking lots of advice, but what are you laughing at?
I'm just remembering what Laura was like. Because even when she was pregnant, I knew nothing. I'd had 2 children, but I knew nothing.
No, absolutely.
She was talking a foreign language. It's like I'd never had a child.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, no, you do it this way, Mum. All right, okay. So I just went to, I love it. Well, really.
So, I guess for me, I did, because I knew about Lucy having Down syndrome during pregnancy, I did loads of research. And I did lots of research around Down syndrome, but I also did lots of research around just having babies generally, because that's just my personality, to be planned and organised. And then I wasn't necessarily...
I knew nothing.
I wasn't taking any advice from anybody other than the advice that people were offering in things like podcasts or videos I would find or, content that I would find on social media.
I think the thing
you did have to admit that things had changed, but you were frustrated that a lot of it was similar.
Oh, it's all the same thing. They just call it all different names, and I didn't know what she was talking about. So
because then I would explain something about like sleep cycles or something, and you'd be like, well, babies did sleep in 45-minute cycles, but we didn't call them sleep cycles.
Yes, exactly.
They just had those naps.
It's very funny because, Laura was just in control, doing that thing. And I was just there to, pick up any pieces, really.
Yeah, absolutely, you were. And I couldn't have done it without you, but it probably didn't feel like that at the time.
I know. But, I think the magic thing was Lucy was just like any baby. There was absolutely no difference in terms of Down syndrome. She was perfect, really. She was beautiful. And she slept, she ate, she drank. Yeah, I mean, and as babies develop, she started getting her own little personality, and I'd go up and look after her, and she was just like any baby. I think we had the underlying worry about her heart. Again, we talk about this word stress keeps coming in, and it's because it's the unknown. And, I remember I had migraines when I was pregnant with Laura. And I always remember my doctor saying, it's because you're in the unknown world. You don't know what's happening to you. You get a hospital appointment. You don't know what that hospital appointment's for, really. You go along. It's the unknown.
And you've always got migraines with stress. And I was a bit the same, wasn't I? Like I would have, I did have some, what I thought were issues with my sinuses, but probably were more stress-related headaches. Because you're taking on a lot of information of like the unknown world that you don't know anything about.
Exactly. But Laura and John were amazing. You wouldn't know it was their first baby. They were just amazing. They just by the book. I would say. They were. But they were textbook as well in that sense. Lucy was absolutely fine.
Yes.
She wasn't showing any signs of anything. And, the little ones don't do an awful lot, do they? Until they're
sleep.
Certainly in 3 months.
Who repeat.
Yes. Yes.
It is that, those T-shirts that have that slogan on is very true in that first 6 months, isn't it?
Yes, they do. They are.
Yeah. And then we had we were going for regular heart checkups, and those times were quite stressful. And I remember now and again you would come up and stay because we needed your support, because we didn't know what we were going to find out at each appointment. But that only lasted probably about 6 months. The first 6 months, like, we were going quite regularly every couple of months, and it was quite stressful. But by the 6-month point, I think children, that's why you start weaning that age, because they start holding themselves up more, and they get a bit bigger, to the point where they were like, oh, our heart's functioning okay. And we were like, oh, kind of stand down, really, because Lucy's heart condition, complete AVSD, is a heart condition that's normally needs repairing. They told us, didn't they, that it would need repairing the first 3 to 6 months. So to get to that 6-month appointment and be told, might do it when she's about a year old, we all just went, phew, we could breathe a little bit. We had a few months respite, was how we felt, wasn't it? And then we got to that 12-month appointment, and they were like, right, we need to do it now. But they didn't really say that, did they? They were like, we need to do it, but it's still not that urgent.
Yes.
But we will put her on the...
But you knew it was going to happen.
Yeah, they put her on the list.
And that was so stressful.
And that was the
because
August.
of COVID. That was so stressful.
Yeah, it was a long list, and she was very near the bottom because she wasn't symptomatic. And it was that sort of that August appointment around her first birthday was, very much right. Well, she's going on the list, blah, blah, blah. And you expected them to be in touch, within a couple of weeks or something. And like a couple of weeks went by, and I think I emailed the nurses, and they were like, "Oh, she's on the list."
And you've got this tiny baby, and the anxiety that needs a heart operation.
Yeah.
And not heard anything from the specialist, so and
I
just
think
pull Laura off the ceiling, and try and calm her down.
About 5
It was awful, awful time.
I think 5 weeks went by. It was the beginning of October, and I just was like, "What is going on?" And I was sat. We'd been to the dentist.
Just imagine.
We'd been to the dentist, and I was sat in in a cafe in Newburn. Poor girl. I mean, whenever I go in now, she remembers me because she'll never forget me. Because I just sat there in floods of tears. And she's like, "Are you okay? Oh, my daughter needs a heart operation and I haven't heard anything. And she's been a bit funny this morning." Because her breathing was a bit funny. I think she must have been coming on with a bit of a cold or something. And I just went into like a blind panic. And I rang. She said, "Well, is there somebody you can ring and ask?" And I rang. While she looked after Lucy. She fed Lucy for me. She gave Lucy some crisps or something. And I rang the Freeman to find out what was happening. And it was almost like she'd been forgotten about. It was almost like,
well, I think she wasn't. Well, that was the problem. Because of COVID, I don't think you were totally in the picture.
No.
Of how things were being done. And babies coming in that were much more poorly than Lucy, but you were so wrapped up in Lucy and needing this heart. That she was the only baby in the world that needed to have heart surgery. But to the hospital, that was far from the truth, because these babies come in, they can come in through the night, all last minute, and it was always the case that something came in more important, and you're not thinking about those families and what they're going through, because it's all babies and little ones and children. So it was difficult.
It's difficult to rationalise, wasn't it?
Yeah, and COVID was the ultimate problem. Why we had to wait
lists,
so long, and then it got worse, because then you're in. So bring her down. We'll do the tests, and oh my God, and then no, sorry. Not happening. Somebody's come in. There's been an emergency. And how many times did that happen?
So between the October, when I kind of made them aware that they'd said they would do it at 12 months and she was now 14 months and we hadn't heard anything, they were like, "Yeah, maybe we do need to look at this. Oh yes, we'll make sure we get her in soon." And that was when the calls started and the cancellation started. So from the October to a surgery in the January, we think we got cancelled about 4 times, but we also, on top of the cancellations, had delays 5 times. So they would initially delay it and say, "Oh, she's not going to have it on Tuesday, she'll have it on Wednesday." And then on the Tuesday night, they would then cancel it and not give us another date. Oh, so it was like 5 episodes, but it was like 10 episodes to us, really.
It was really different.
In the space of a few months, and it was really tough. And between the Christmas and New Year, I did, that's out of everything that's happened over the last 3.5, 4 years, that I do remember being...
I think that was the most stressful thing.
Yeah. That was the most stressful thing, where I felt like on the edge of my mental health.
I, as a mother and a grandmother, it was that, it's as heart. Is Lucy going to be all right? And we didn't know, she's tiny little baby having heart surgery.
And they talk about the risks all the time of what could happen and what could go wrong. So,
and then building yourself up to it going, to Lucy going in, and then it not happening. Like, okay, when is it going to happen? And I would hope that wouldn't happen going forwards for people, because it was COVID that was causing that.
I think
they do have.
It still happens, but it still happens, but it doesn't seem, from the families I know that have been through it in the last sort of 12 months, it doesn't seem as bad as it was then.
But like I say, we were in a Lucy bubble. But obviously there were other families and other
with greater
children,
needs,
you know, and that's what you don't take on board when you're in that situation. And I was really worried about Laura's anxiety because each time it happened, it was building up more and more. John he was amazing and very stoic, if that's the right word.
Stoic.
Stoic. And which was great support for Laura, but I was so proud of both of them, but so proud of Laura in managing to hold it together. And I think in any situation like that, when people are put under that kind of pressure, it's very difficult to understand. It's like the swan on the lake. And everything's going crazy under the water.
Yeah.
It was very much like that.
Yeah.
Feeling.
Because we had Lucy, and
Yes.
when you have a child in that situation, you need to remain calm in front of them, and they need to not pick up.
What do children do but pick up on vibes?
They do pick up on vibes.
Like I'm not making reference directly with animals, but in a way I am, because animals do that. We do that. We pick up on people's vibes.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
They were amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. I think one of the reasons John was able to be so supportive and kept such a level head during that time was because his work were very supportive.
Oh, yes,
of him.
they were.
Obviously, you were holding my other baby, the recruitment business, so I didn't need to worry about my work, and John didn't need to worry about his work because they just kept saying, work from home if you need to, take a day off if you need to. So when we had a cancellation, he wouldn't just immediately go, well, we're not going into the Freeman today, I'll go back to work. He would let them know what had happened. And generally, because I was so upset, he'd usually take that day just to support me. And I think that was a big help during that time.
Oh, it must have been.
I've heard from other families where they're put under pressure from their work, and it's the last thing you need in those situations. And there's a big push on parental leave, and businesses, are being forced to support parents with parental leave, but that's unpaid leave. People can't cope not being paid. We're all stretched financially. Mm-hmm. So to expect parents to take time off and not be paid is not how it should work. And a lot of parents in those situations are forced to do that. So the fact that John's employer was supportive, allowed him to do what he needed to do, and still paid him was a big thing, I think, that got us through that time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah, it was, and when the day finally came and Lucy went in for a ROP, you were so funny, Mum, because you just wanted to be there for us. And you didn't know what to do. So you took us, do you remember, you took us to Morrison's or somewhere? We decided we wanted to buy Lucy an outfit for when she woke up from her operation, because that was the only thing you could think of that might take our minds off it. And John was like, you two go and do that. That just doesn't feel right to go shopping while Lucy's under the knife. I'll stay near the hospital just in case. And he had a wander around the park, didn't he? And we went off to... And actually, that worked really well. I think if the three of us had stayed together, we probably would have got a bit fraught because we were all so stressed.
Definitely.
And it was that those few hours were some of the scariest hours ever, because it's that lack of control. You've got no idea what's happening.
No.
And you're just waiting for the phone to ring. And I remember them saying the op will take about 5 hours. It got to 5 minutes before the 5 hours were up, and we'd checked into the accommodation on the grounds, which was brilliant, wasn't it? That you could stay at our house and we could stay at the accommodation on the grounds. Scott House and the charity that run that is just, the Sick Children's Trust that support that house is just fantastic. And please, anybody give money to the Sick Children's Trust if you can, to keep those houses going, because again, that took our minds off it a little bit, that we were, it's like checking into a hotel almost. And we, unpacked our bags, and we were literally hanging things in the wardrobe, and they'd said, we'll know what room you've been given and we'll ring the phone in the room. And it was 5 minutes to 5 hours and the phone rang, and John and I just looked at each other like, and it was like, is it good? Is it bad? Is it good? Who's going to pick the phone up? And I picked the phone up. I was like, and it was the surgeon that had done the operation, which I didn't expect. And she said, hi, I've finished Lucy's operation. It's gone really well. We've got a slightly leaky valve, slightly leakier than we wanted to leave it. But apart from that, she's done fantastic. She's in recovery. Don't rush over. You can't see her just yet. Give us a sort of half an hour or so and you can come over and see her. So I remember us both breathing, like that sigh of relief was just, ooh, and then the first thing we did was ring you. And actually, you weren't able to do anything because of COVID. And I don't know even though if it was a COVID thing. I think it might just be a rule in PICU that only the parents are allowed in. Yeah. So, and they said she'd be on PICU for at least 24 hours or something, didn't they? So we said, look, Mum, you know, I think you... Did you see? I don't think you did see us, did you? I think we had sent you home.
I remember, how long was she in hospital?
So she had the op on the Monday morning and they tried to discharge us on the Saturday, but we squatted until the Sunday.
Right. Because I remember sleeping next to Lucy.
Yes,
once
she'd gone on the ward.
Because I was worried about you and John being exhausted.
Taking her home, yeah.
So I did 2 nights watch with her.
Yeah.
And honestly, that was such a privilege. And I had my little bed next to Lucy's, you know, one of those chairs.
The chair bed things next to the cot, yeah.
And honestly, every hour I must have woken up and like, oh yeah, a hand's still warm.
Oh, God. And that's why I couldn't do that, because I would have done the same as you and I wouldn't have slept properly.
I knew you wouldn't.
And anybody that's going through anything like that, it doesn't have to be heart surgery. If you've got a poorly child in hospital and you've got a parent or a relative or a friend that is willing to come and sleep next to your child to allow you to go and sleep, please take them up on that offer.
Yes,
because it got us through that time, definitely.
You got some sleep.
We did get some rest. So yeah, she had the op on the Monday. She was in PICU. She's just smashed a recovery. I think you came to see her in PICU the next day on the Tuesday.
I saw her
when she did the little wave.
Did see her in PICU. We were all standing there and we were all going, "Hello, Lucy," you know, and trying to sort of wake her up. And she, this little
still with her eyes closed,
came up and she waved.
We'll share the video on the website.
I'm here.
It's very cute.
Incredible.
It was amazing, wasn't it? And and once she'd done that, that's when all the nurses seemed to kind of relax a bit. Yeah. And they were like, "Oh, let's start weaning her off now, and let's get her going." And we were all like, "Really? Like, is she ready to wake up?" And they were like, "Well, we'll do it tomorrow morning." So I think they did it on the Wednesday morning, and that same day, the Wednesday morning, they brought her around, took her everything away, and that was a bit scary. That was a bit of a traumatic moment because as she came up from the sedation, she pulled the breathing tube out, and there was a bit of a panic, and there was an emergency happening, and there weren't any doctors available, and the nurses, again, couldn't see their faces, but I could see their eyes, and I could see the panic in their eyes. So we were kind of ushered into the family room, which wasn't the best moment, but it is what it is. These things do happen, and they did, you know, they were very professional. They did deal with it really well. And again, the surgeon happened to be available to come in and tell us what had happened, and they'd got they didn't put the feeding tube back in, but they got the breathing tube back in, and everything was okay. Or the oxygen on her or whatever they needed to do. And she said, again, like, give us 10 minutes, just make sure she is definitely settled, and then you can come back and see her. And she was fine. And that later that day, they were like, right, she's not PICU. She doesn't need to be in PICU anymore. Let's get her onto the HDU ward, which is like the high dependency ward where...
Yeah. We're all like, are you sure?
We were like, I'm pretty sure you said she'd be on PICU for at least 3 days. And this is like the beginning of the 3rd day. And you're telling us she needs to go on HDU. And we were like, are you sure? Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we've done this quite a few times. We are sure. But we were a bit shocked, weren't we? Because she still was quite sedated, and she wasn't herself, was she? And that night wasn't great. She got quite upset. It turned out she just needed to do a big poo, which the nurses, because at 7:00 you've got to leave their beds, or is it 7:00 you've got to leave, or you've got to leave while they do the handover at 7, and then I think at 10 you have to leave their bed overnight because you're not allowed to stay on that ward with them. The nurses look after them overnight, which again, you know, is a good thing that the parents have to go away and rest. But that Wednesday night, she didn't have a great night, and they did call John back to say, "Can you come and give us a hand here. She doesn't seem very happy and she might appreciate a parent kind of thing. Because she was 16 months, whereas they're used to children having this op at 3 to 6 months. She was, more aware of, the fact mum and dad weren't there and that kind of thing, I think. So he went back and dealt with the big poo, and bless him. And but I remember the next morning, the Thursday morning, they were like, "Oh, she seems fine. Let's get her on the normal ward." And we were like,
"No, that's
absolutely not. She's not ready to do that." And we established they needed the bed. And we were like, look, we understand you need the bed, but this is our baby and she's not herself and she's not smiling and we're worried about her and we don't feel comfortable moving on to the normal ward. And they listened to us for a bit and they let us keep her on there for a bit. But I think that it was that Thursday night.
Yes.
Yeah,
it was.
They moved her and John stayed with her and didn't sleep, did he?
No, he didn't sleep at all.
And that's when you said, right, I'm going to stay with her on Friday night. You two need to go and rest, because John was like a zombie on the Friday and, not even 10 monsters were helping. He was just, the energy drinks weren't touching the sides. He was exhausted. As much as he was telling us all he was fine, we knew he was exhausted, bless him. So you stepped in and stayed with her on that Friday night. And I remember John and I going to bed that Friday night like, do you think something's happened? She's just not, because she was such a smiley kid and she hadn't smiled up to this point. So we hadn't seen her smile for 5 days. And I remember just I did sleep, but it was very broken sleep because I kept waking up panicking that something had happened during the operation that they hadn't picked up on, or they weren't telling us even, or you just don't know.
It's very natural.
That kind of worry. And then the Saturday morning, I remember it was about 7:30, 8 o'clock, and you text us a picture of Lucy sat up in her bed with the biggest grin on her face, and we were just like, oh, there's our baby. And we both burst into tears and then had to get ourselves together to come and obviously take over and let you go and have a rest. And then later that Saturday they were like, right, get her home, and we were like, absolutely not. I remember they were writing the discharge papers and John and I were stood at the desk saying we are not going home. And we effectively did, because it was a weekend and it was reasonably quiet on the ward. And you were quite happy to stay with her that second night, the Saturday night. You were like, you still both look shattered.
I was adamant.
I'll stay again, because then if you are taking her home tomorrow, you need to have had some decent rest.
Absolutely.
And because we were...
I like the toast in the hospital.
Getting waited on. But yeah, so it was an interesting day that Saturday, because they were adamant she was well enough to go home and we were adamant she wasn't. And yet again, we got into a bit of a spat about it. And because it was quiet, they let us stay and we took her home on the Sunday. And honestly, we've never looked back, have we?
No. It's
just been an incredible 18 months since then, because she just went from strength to strength. We had no idea, because they were telling us she wasn't symptomatic with a heart condition. We had no idea how her heart condition was affecting her. And it wasn't till she was bear crawling within 3 weeks of the op that we were like, maybe this was holding her back a little bit.
I think it was.
She had like this renewed energy, didn't she?
Yeah. And her colour.
Her colour was different.
It was better afterwards. And
she was more pink and just more lively.
More energy, basically.
Yeah, and within 3 weeks of bear crawling, she was then 4-point crawling, and then that was the next year and a half or whatever it was. She was 4-point crawling everywhere, and she turned 3 last.
There's some of that, 4-point crawling. Hello, what's that?
New terminology, which I don't know. It's new terminology because I wasn't there in the first place. So. But it's the terminology I've learned.
Yes.
So she did all of that, and then she turned 3 last August, and we'll talk more about how things have progressed since then in the next episode. But
brilliant.
Thank you very much for joining me, Mum.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Love you.
Love you. See you all for episode 6 very soon. Thanks for listening.
Niltoni Broadcast Network, NBN, popcorn for your ears.